All right, y'all. Happy New Year. And welcome to the Switch for Good podcast. I am flying solo today as far as hosts go because Alexandra is on a trip and I miss her. But I kind of feeling pretty comfy because I got my friend back here, Dr. Faraz, who was just on the podcast in November, actually, you might remember. He is an extraordinary human, and we did not even honestly get to even half of the content that we wanted to cover. So we said, come back, and he booked for early January. He is among all of the other things that you learned about him in the other episode in November. Today, we're going to talk about his kind of current day work, which spans a lot of what we touched on before, and of course stems from an extraordinary history that he shared with us. But today he's a cultivated meat bioprocessing scientist, if you got all that, at the Good Food Institute, and the founder and CEO of Allied Scholars for Animal Protection. It's a nonprofit that supports and mentors student advocates and future vegan leaders for the abolition of cruelty to humans and non-humans. Dr. Faraz appeared on the podcast back in November. Like I said, it was episode 256. And we just had such a powerful conversation, as many of you heard, about his upbringing in Iran as a member of the LGBT community, his advocacy work on college campuses, and a myriad of social justice issues. But believe it or not, as I mentioned, there was so much more ground that we didn't get to cover, especially about his current day work. So we had to have him back on. So whether you listen to the first part of our interview with him, you definitely want to stay with us because we're about to tackle some serious topical issues that pertain to, well, just about everyone. So welcome back to the show, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Really pleasure. It's my pleasure to be here for a second time. Such a short time.
I don't think it's going to be, I don't think it's just going to be a second time either with some of the stuff we were just talking about, research and science. I don't know. I think there's going to be a third and fourth. So, oh my gosh. All right. So we are just going to flow from the beginning in terms of what you do now for the Good Food Institute and for the health and wellness and love of all living beings. You spent 10 years, and I did not know this before, studying cancer and protein structure and function. And you got your doctorate literally studying protein. So we've had a lot of docs on the show that talk about proteins, but I think that you might have the most background and the most knowledge. So first, let's just discuss this complete protein myth, really, if you will. I get it all the time as an athlete, got it all the time in training. Oh, I don't know, you better not do those plants. You can't get a complete protein, while my muscles were building just fine and I gained 15 pounds of muscle inside of less than a year on plants. But why are plants such a fantastic source of protein, and are they complete?
I think it's a very bad definition. It's a very harmful definition. And useless. The reason I think it's a bad definition is because it's useless. It is based on some criteria, which is true, but that criteria doesn't mean anything and doesn't have any real life applications. Complete proteins, so it suggests that plants don't have complete proteins.
Right.
Or it suggests that if something is not a complete protein, that means that it doesn't have certain amino acids, which is absolutely not true. It's not what it means. Every single plant has all 20 amino acids. So all the proteins that we eat pretty much gets chopped up into the building blocks, which is the 20 amino acids, and our body makes our own proteins. So any protein that it's like a Lego. Just I always think about it. Let's say you have 20 pieces of Lego. Proteins are basically tools. Your body uses different proteins to do different things. What happens is that, imagine I am a cow. I'm making cow proteins. Now you ate me. What you're going to do is to disassemble my Lego parts, use those parts, and make human tools with those Lego pieces. You can do the same thing with soy protein. So it doesn't matter. So those are the same building blocks.
So whether you're taking in, you said you are a cow and you're making cow protein, and then we eat the cow protein, and then my body disassembles those 20 amino acids to do different work in my body.
Yeah,
Do I have
exactly.
that? Okay.
So there are 20 amino acids. So for instance, the cow has to eat those plants, right?
Yep.
And when you're talking about proteins, by the way, these are like thousands of different types of proteins. It's not, protein is not one molecule that you just have proteins. There are like tons of different proteins that your body. So the whole purpose of your DNA is to make this protein. So every part of your DNA makes a different protein, makes a different tool. I do a very quick background with this.
Okay.
It's, imagine if you had like a, manual for something like a IKEA, right? Let's say
Yeah.
IKEA manual. So it basically shows you how to assemble small parts to make a couch, right? So your DNA is that manual. Your amino acids are those tiny pieces, and the couch or a piano or a, I don't know, a table, those are the proteins. Those, you build them using a few materials like wood, like metal,
Right.
those
So
tiny
they're the
pieces.
blocks, if you
Those,
will, the
yeah,
building blocks.
building blocks. So every time you have a protein from another species, whether it's plant or animal, it has to be chopped up into tiny individual amino acids. And then from there, your body makes its own human proteins, and tons of them. So you need almost half of these from your diet. The other half your body can actually make. So only 9 of them are essential that you have to get from diet. Complete protein is a bad definition because it suggests that things that are not complete proteins, they don't have these essential amino acids, which is not true. All plants have all 20 amino acids, including the 9 essential ones. The only thing that really complete protein means is that if you were going to eat only one food, you can get all these amino acids in the recommended ratios. So it's not about like whether you get them or not, it's about whether you can get them in certain ratios. When you're talking about meat, it doesn't surprise me that you can get all those essential amino acids in the right ratio, because meat is made of tons of different proteins itself. We just call it protein as a whole, we categorize it, but every single cell in meat makes tons of different proteins. So it doesn't surprise me. But it's a bad definition because with plants, the only way really to not get enough of all these essential amino acids in the right ratio is if you were eating just rice, like nothing else. If your diet was rice, if your diet was almonds, like you ate nothing else. If you remotely try to combine different types of vegetables and plants and seeds and all that, it is virtually impossible not to get enough proteins. And that's why it's a bad definition.
Okay.
And even with that bad definition, soy, hemp, and a few other sources of proteins are actually still complete proteins. So
Yeah.
useless definition. And at the end of the day, some plants have complete proteins, if that makes sense.
No, I like the way that you described it, because I mean that's what we kind of always hear, and I always say back is nobody just eats one food that I know of. I mean I've never met anyone, and so but if you just ate cow, and if I just ate rice, you would have more proteins, because that animal had to make those proteins, and so so it's a quote complete. But it's a great way to dispel that myth, because I think people think, of course they do, that you're eating a variety of a plant-based diet, and it's still, you can't get a complete protein, which is completely untrue. So just keep eating a variety of rich, delicious, healthy, satisfying, full of nutrients foods, and you're getting your complete protein.
Yeah, and just remember that those cows also are eating, plant-based. So they are getting all their essential amino acids at the end of the day from plants. So even cows don't have
Right.
problem in getting their essential amino acids.
Right.
And every time you are thinking about, like, people talk about getting, do I need to get collagen supplements? It doesn't work that way. If you, collagen is a complex protein. If you eat collagen, it's not gonna go to your skin as collagen. You are gonna break it down to all those amino acids as if you ate any other protein.
Yeah.
And then your body makes makes its own collagen. So it's not like if you eat protein, it just intact ends up in your
Mhm.
body as some sort of protein. If that would be true, we would
Right.
be in big trouble.
Right. Right. And if you just eat cow, you're probably going to die more of heart disease than any kind of protein problem or
That's a
too
very
much
good.
protein,
That's
right?
a
Like
very
say,
good.
it's not going to be a good. And I've definitely learned through being a lady who's aging and going, gosh, my skin is doing weird things or getting brown spots or sagging or whatnot. And that the most effective way to get more collagen is to promote your own collagen. So let's say on the face, some microneedling or something that then makes your body go, whoa, okay, there's some damage there, which I know really well as an athlete. Everything was damage repair, damage repair. That's all we were after every day. And same with the skin. Instead of swallowing collagen, it's encouraging your body to make more of its own in a
Exactly.
natural way. Although microneedling doesn't feel that good, so I don't know. Okay, that is fantastic, dispelling that myth and understanding it a little deeper. Let's talk about animal protein, because you're the protein master. Animal protein and cancer.
So there's
I'm
a,
leaving that open-ended because you're the master, and there's so many, ways that you can go with that, but we're interested to learn from you.
I guess I just want to put it out there that when you're talking about proteins, I know that looking at diet can be and nutrition as a whole, it can be confusing, but what I encourage people is to just go to a hospital. Do they see people dying from protein deficiency and B12 deficiency, or do they see people dying from heart attack, cancer, diabetes, and other chronic diseases?
Yeah.
So when it comes to cancer, there are multiple ways that meat can promote um, cancer. Um, I guess the reason that I promote plant-based diet and veganism full-time today is because I did my entire master's on cancer and I worked on proteins involved in cancer.
Uh-huh.
And the fact that nobody ever mentioned diet at all, like I'm not talking about my research, no one, even in those textbooks, and it had to come as a surprise to me when I had to learn it by myself. And then you looked at it and you realize that every single cancer institute in the world says the less meat you eat, the better. Every single cancer institute in the world, and some even include dairy and other types of meat. But when it comes to processed and unprocessed red meat, every single cancer institute in the world says the less meat you eat, the better, right? So, but just like nobody, the fact that you can get a graduate degree in cancer research and nobody even mentions diet at all was the reason I'm so passionate about this.
Mm.
Uh, Diet or lifestyle, nobody even talked about preventive approaches and interventions, even smoking and alcohol, none of that. It's just drugs, 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 which it doesn't mean that drugs don't help. It doesn't mean that there are not some kinds of cancer where you need drugs, but according to Cancer Research UK, 40% of cancers can be prevented. So almost half of them. Everybody knows someone who suffered from cancer. So just think about those people. Half of them shouldn't have developed cancer. The link between cancer and diet, of course, other factors are alcohol, sugar, sugary drinks, and smoking. But the other factor is diet. And when it comes to red meat, especially, and other sorts of meat, there are different hypotheses. One of them uh, is that the heme in red meat,
Mhm.
actually, when it gets metabolized, it generates compounds that are reactive, and they can damage the intestine or bowel, and they can cause bowel cancer and other sorts of cancer. So heme is one. So people talk about heme iron, which is good in meat. They say like meat has heme iron, it absorbs really quickly, which is true, except that the part that they don't tell you is that when you cook meat, the heme iron actually precipitates, so you get rid of it, it doesn't get absorbed. But we don't get to iron. But that heme part can actually get metabolized and increase the risk of cancer. So that's one. So something to notice is that heme can be found in red meat and also white meat. So even if they don't tell you that, chicken or fish can lead to cancer, we know fact A, we know heme can get metabolized to carcinogenic compounds. Fact B, we know heme can be found in also fish and chicken. Make your own conclusion from this.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the risk might be lower, but it doesn't mean it's not there, right? And we have to also remember that a lot of these dietary guidelines, because they think people would not go fully plant-based, they have to put some animal products there just because they think people have to eat it. And that's why they end up putting fish or chicken there. But it doesn't mean that they work as well as plant-based diet. It just means that they do better than perhaps red meat, but it doesn't mean that there are ideal things to consume. So that's one of them. The other factor is that when you cook meat, you're also generating a lot of polycyclic hydrocarbons that also are carcinogenic. And this is not a matter of if, it happens. When you cook meat with high temperatures, without humidity, these compounds are formed. The best way of doing that is to basically boil. And that's also true about anything else, really, but avoid frying. But barbecuing, frying, grilling, pretty much any sort of high temperature way of cooking meat, it will generate carcinogenic compounds. It's not a matter of if, it just happens. And how many people do you know who eat boiled chicken wings? I don't know many. I don't even know if it's going to taste great. So
you mean boring, like without all the sauce, barbecue and blue cheese
boiling,
and stuff, or
like who boils like chicken or chicken wings?
Gross, right? Nobody. Yeah,
So it's pretty gross. But
right.
so unless it's like in low temperature with a lot of water, you end up generating this carcinogenic compound. So it happens, and it happens with fish, it happens with chicken, it happens with red meat, doesn't matter. There's that.
And then, so what about, I mean, we got rid of our grill a while ago, really, because when we were at Olympics and training 3 months before in Europe, mice moved into the grill. And so we're like, okay, that's your home now. And we haven't grilled since. But I learned most of this pretty shortly after that period of time. And we didn't get another grill because same thing, if I'm going to grill a soy patty, a block of tofu, and I'm going to do it at really high temperatures, there's going to be some carcinogenic compounds that I'm going to form, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So,
and this especially happens with animal products and cholesterol. So oxidizing cholesterol by itself, not as bad as when it gets oxidized when you cook basically animal products. And I say animal products not because they're animal products, it's because all animal products have cholesterol and all plant foods don't have cholesterol.
yeah.
So also cooking cholesterol generates like oxidized cholesterol. And what really happens in a very simple manner is that when you heat a lot of these chemicals, you're making them reactive. You're generating compounds that are very much reactive. A lot of times there are oxidants. What it really means for people who don't have a background in chemistry is that all compounds, they really need to pair their electrons. They don't like to have single electrons hanging out there. Electrons really like to get paired with other electrons. That's why water is neutral, because oxygen has 2 unpaired electrons. So it really likes 2 hydrogens to pair those electrons. If you give it 1 extra oxygen, then you have hydrogen peroxide, that becomes super active because now it has unpaired electrons. So when you have those reactive oxygens, they really like to find anything and react with them. So when you eat these foods with oxidants or reactive oxidant species, that's what they're called, they find anything in your gut, anything in your body to interact with. And if that thing happened to be the lining of your intestine, if it's the DNA in the cell, they can cause mutations, they can cause damage to your DNA. That's how they can promote cancer. And guess what? Actually, not only doesn't produce these carcinogenic compounds, but also has a lot of antioxidants. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, all that stuff, right? Not only they don't promote cancer, but also they're actually anti-cancer. The reason for that is they have a lot of antioxidants. Vitamin C is a good example of that. And there's tons of them. All they do is that they also provide extra electrons for these oxidants to pair. So instead of damaging your cells, now they get that extra electron, they get paired with those antioxidants, so they leave your body alone. But yeah, and then the other thing in meat is also the ratio of one of the essential amino acids, ironically, is too high, which is methionine. It's high in beef, high in dairy, it's high in egg, and it's very much low in plant foods. So what does that matter? Because methionine is so essential that cancer cells rely on a lot of external methionine. Your normal body cells, they do need methionine, but they're also really good at recycling it. So they just need a little bit that you can get from your diet. But when you give a lot of it to the body, you're basically promoting cancer in a way that if there is any cancer cell, if you're already at higher risk, if you're already eating animal products to damage your cells to promote cancer, then by adding extra methionine, you're actually feeding these cancer cells. It's actually really interesting. In the lab, when you're working with breast cancer cells, with normal breast tissue, you don't need to add methionine supplements, but with breast cancer cells, you actually have to supplement them consistently with methionine, because
So
otherwise,
normal breast cells, I think you said normal breast cancer cells in the beginning. Normal breast cells, you don't need to.
Normal breast cells, you don't need, but for breast cancer cells, to feed them with methionine.
And then what? And then that helps to kill the cancer cells.
Yeah, they call it methionine starvation. So if you actually starve those cancer cells from methionine, they die.
Fascinating.
You could also, starve your body from a lot of nutrients, and your cancer cells die, so as your healthy cells. But in this case, your healthy cells can actually manage, especially if you have a little methionine, just as much as your body needs.
Right.
And the evidence for it is strong enough that pharmaceutical companies were trying to find medications that actually bind to methionine and limit its accessibility for your cells, so that they can starve cancer cells. So it's called methionine dependent cancer growth, and it's in clinical trials. So it's not a hypothesis. It's not something that like just an idea in a lab. It is legit enough that it is in clinical trials. Pharmaceutical companies are trying to limit methionine in order to improve cancer survival. As a whole, methionine restriction has been shown to be one of the best dietary interventions to increase the lifespan, especially for cancer patients. I'm not sure about the clinical trials in volunteers, like healthy volunteers, but I know that there are clinical trials where they're testing drugs that bind to methionine for that exact purpose. So
okay, so a little bit is good, a lot is definitely not good, and your body will, if you eat a little bit, it will recycle it and make it so you have it enough, but not too much. I mean, that sounds very similar to a lot of aspects of diets in general, like little bit, not too much. Maybe I'm like that with olive oil, I guess. Okay, so that's really helpful. Yes, go.
Just to recap, when people talk about animal proteins, the main, I guess, concerns they have, one is complete protein. We just debunked. Even if that's your problem, soy is complete protein, so is hemp, etc. But it's a bad measure, as we discussed. And the other thing is that they say that the bioavailability of animal-based protein is higher. It actually could be, but those are based on feeding pigs dry beans and looking at how much they absorb proteins that way. So fun fact, you're not a pig. The other fact,
darn it,
you probably don't eat dry beans. I don't know, maybe they're, so, and even if the bioavailability was higher, sure, so what? It doesn't mean that you can't get it from plant-based sources. All it means is that you could perhaps have a little bit more of it, but it's not even the case. But even if that was true, that would still, any two foods would have different characteristics. Just because this one has one thing that is better than the other doesn't mean that it is overall a better choice.
Right.
But in terms of bioavailability, in clinical research, in actual humans, there has been no difference between muscle strength and growth between plant-based food and animal-based food protein. On the other hand, replacing animal protein with plant-based food, plant-based protein, especially from legumes, it actually reduces the risk of a lot of chronic diseases. So to sum this up, when you get your protein from animal sources, you're also getting a lot of other things, right? So your body needs protein, it doesn't need meat. When you get your protein from meat, you're also getting a lot of bad stuff that your body doesn't need, such as cholesterol, such as saturated fat, such as endotoxins. I can ramble about endotoxin for 2 hours, but those also cause inflammation. You don't get fiber, you don't get a lot of those antioxidants. If you replace that with beans, lentils, seeds, nuts, and fruits and vegetables, not only you're going to get your protein, but also you're not going to get cholesterol, you're going to lower your saturated fat, you're not going to get trans fat, you're going to get a lot of fiber. And all of that actually reduce the risk of all of these factors. They actually reduce the risk of cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and cancer, and many other chronic diseases. So overall, it's a much better choice to go with plant-based protein.
Okay. All right. Sold. I love it. No, that was really helpful. And I like how you wrapped it up, which is a great segue into cultivated meat, which is where I want to go next. And you, like I mentioned in the intro, work with Good Food Institute and your cultivated meat bioprocessing senior scientist there. And a lot of people that go either plant-based or move away from animal foods, let's say, do it for their health. Maybe they had the beginnings of heart disease. Maybe they had a heart attack and they had an aha moment that I have to make a big change. Maybe they have type 2 diabetes. Maybe they're overweight or obese, and they're seeing all of the the health implications, if you will, the hints that, hey, your diet's not healthy. And there's quite often, when you look at those diets, really high in meat and dairy, but especially meat. So you're working on cell-based meats, which are going to be, I would assume, fantastic for ending factory farming. But we still have, is the way I understand it, meat is meat is meat. So talk to me about what you're doing there and what your hope is for human animals if we were to move to a world where there are no animals raised in factory farms or any farms for food, but they're grown in a lab, but it's still just as unhealthy.
So that's a good point. I don't work on cultivated meat, aka lab-grown meat. We don't call it lab-grown anymore because it's not made in labs, really. But I don't work on cultivated meat because I think it's healthy or helpful. I work on it because I know that it's a good solution for a lot of global challenges that we have. People talk about personal choices a lot when we talk about diet, that it's my personal choice. There is a degree of validity to that, that if you want to decide to eat apple versus French fries, I really hope that you choose apple, and I would encourage that, but I can't really stop you from doing so if you really want to have French fries. And I have French fries sometimes. So that's a part that is your personal choice.
Yeah.
But when we eat animal products, we're causing damage to the environment. We are increasing the risk of pandemics, antibiotic resistance, and these are things that impact everybody. So for me, I feel responsible if I were going to eat animal products. So if I had meat, egg, dairy, the way I think about it is I'm doing something wrong to you. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in that position.
Right.
Growing up in Iran, in Tehran, it's a very polluted city. I always saw cars driving with making a lot of smoke. I was like, if you are increasing my risk of cancer, you're responsible for that. How can you drive with a car like that, knowing that it causes so much suffering to other people? And today I feel the same thing when I see these trucks that produce a lot of smoke. It's like, how can you do this to other people? And that's the same thing with eating animal products. How can you do this to other people? How can you increase the risk of antibiotic resistance and pandemics and so many other global issues which impact literally everybody? When you damage the environment, you are doing something wrong to everybody in the
Yeah,
world, right?
yeah.
So because of that, I feel responsible to you to not eat animal products. And because of, so I'm making a distinction here. So when you are consuming cultivated meat, it is actually a personal choice because you're eating meat, but you're not causing the environmental problems. You're not causing animals to suffer. You're not increasing the risk of pandemics, antibiotic resistance. So the whole idea of cultivated meat is to give these people who are not going to go plant-based an option. So nutritionally, though, you are right. At the end of the day, it's going to be meat. I think people who really care about their health should not consume any kind of meat. But with cultivated meat, there is at least an argument to be made that you can make it without antibiotics. You can manipulate the fat composition so you can lower the saturated fat or cholesterol to a degree. So these are things that you can, at the end of the day, manipulate.
Yeah.
You can make it such that it's more nutritious than actual meat. But at the end of the day, it's red meat. It's gonna have saturated fat. It's gonna have cholesterol. It's gonna have other compounds that you don't need.
Yeah.
So it's a
But
good thing to have
a lot
as
more
an
steps in, like you said, I really, being here in Mexico, they don't have the same emission standards as the States. And it's, going mountain biking, I'm like, oh, this air is not, you could just feel it in your chest and the burn. And so there's massive global issues that would be solved if we went towards the cell-based meat, like you said, and the less chance of zoonotic diseases like avian or swine, and certainly less antibiotic resistance. But I wanted to go back to something you said. It's not grown in a lab, which I didn't know. Where is cell-based meat grown, and where will it be grown once the adoption takes place, like you're hoping for, and how many ever years?
So yeah, when there is R&D, research and development, of course it happens in the lab, but so as any other food. It's as
Sure.
if you said that sausage is lab grown, because it used to be developed in labs, of course, being tested, still gets tested regularly in labs for safety, etc. Safety. So lab grown meat, the reason we don't call it lab grown is because eventually it's going to be just like making beer, right? You're just going to have a big incubator, big cultivator in this case, giant tanks. You give them the cells, cells grow, and then you harvest meat, just like any other food processing. So was your question how we make it?
Yeah. Well, my question, if it's not in labs,
Okay,
because
yeah.
I think
So
people literally call it lab-based meat. I mean, that's what we've grown accustomed to. So I want to
that
right
was the
that
first,
wrong.
yeah, that was the first thing that people called it, because at the
Yeah.
time it was being developed as an idea in labs, in petri dishes actually.
Yeah.
But today it's not like that anymore. So it's just cultivators, just like anything else, like beer.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can be,
It depends on the scale of the company. So if they're small scale, still in the lab, but that's not for consumption. But those that are actually producing products for human consumption, such as two companies in the US that got FDA and USDA approval last year. So, they are not being produced in a lab. The environment is actually very similar to, if you've seen pharmaceutical facilities, where everyone is gowning up, everyone is
yep.
like super clean, sterile. So it's so much more sterile and cleaner than any other food processing.
Yeah. By a million long shots, I would imagine, because we've seen the inside of some of these other
Yeah.
processing of animals. So if you had a fairy wand, when do you believe that the pricing will be competitive with factory farmed animals?
Yeah, that's a question that I don't think anyone really has the answer. I know that it's a thing that everybody asks, but I don't think anyone really can foresee that, because the development is not it's not going to be linear. So if you look at a lot of other things
Sure.
that develop, such
Yeah.
as like solar panels and electric vehicles, it's like stationary, and suddenly it takes off. And
Yeah.
because of that exponential growth, it's hard to predict. What I can tell you is
Well, do you
that,
have a dream? Because I don't
yeah,
think it's going to be easy to predict, but knowing you have a
yeah.
dream of when that might be the case.
So I think in a year or two, it would be cost competitive with higher end products.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, with higher end, so more expensive sort of meat. When it gets when it reaches to price parity with, you know, a burger or a sausage, probably 10 over a decade,
Okay.
unless some, the only problem we really have is just the scaling up, which is my job, how to scale up, what are the challenges, how can we solve them.
Yeah.
But I personally don't see it as a problem that we cannot solve. It's not that it's a scientific challenge that we are reaching a hard stop. We just have to develop the technology. And if we manage to if we manage to go to the moon, I think this is the sort of problem that we can solve. It's just a matter of time.
Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want.
I want to stay right on the science, but I want to go a little bit into animal testing because quite a bit in this field, if you will. And you spoke in 2022 in front of the San Antonio City Council to stop the expansion of Texas Biomed's use of primates in experimentation. I want to understand from you, and this is a big area that Alexandra has worked in for a very long time, including passing federal law at the end of last year. Give us the reasons that you cited when you were there speaking in front of City Council as to why animal experimentation, especially these that are very closest genetically to us, should not be done.
So one reason is that every single animal species is different biochemically, anatomically, and immunologically. Even people are different. Like even if you tested a drug on me, we already know that it doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to work the same way in other people, right? Some people have, so we already have variations between us as one species. And when you cross the species barrier, when you go to other primates or other animals, you basically lose something called generalizability. So your data is not going to be generalizable to other species, especially when you test on these animals. They're genetically identical, very, very similar to each other. They do not, by no means, they represent what happens in humans in all ways. Are we similar in some ways? Of course we are. But I think when you're looking at testing something that you don't know what's going to happen in humans on another species, what really matters is our differences, because those little differences can cause drastic problems. For anyone who wonders about this, you can look up drug trial TGN 1412. That's a drug that they tested in other primates, and it worked just fine, proved to be absolutely safe.
What's it for?
It was a T-cell binding drug. I don't remember what the disease it was treating for.
Okay.
But what happens is they tested it in monkeys in 500 times extra dosage that they would do in humans, 500 times extra, and it showed to be safe. Then they went to humans, phase 1 clinical trials. Phase 1 is healthy volunteers. And the moment they gave this drug to people, they had a cytokine storm. So that's basically like huge inflammation that led to amputations of toes and major organ failures. The video of this thing is on YouTube, so you can actually see what happened in like real time when they give these people these drugs. So this was shown to be safe in other primates, and not every drug that we test on humans is tested on primates because primates are extremely expensive. So that just tells you that even when we test it on other primates, it doesn't guarantee that it's going to be safe in humans. So animal testing cannot guarantee safety. It gives us one way. Do we learn something? Yes. Is it useful? Probably not, because we can't predict if it's going to work in humans or not. What is the downside, though? The reason that it can actually hold science back is that sometimes it does hurt other animals. So the reverse situation, it does hurt mice, it does hurt other primates, but it could work in humans. It could be that cure for that cancer, but we never explore it because it failed in mice. To make it very simple, imagine if we tested chocolate on mice or dog or any other animal, any other mammal to test its safety for humans. We would have assessed that chocolate is toxic to humans. We know it's not, but if we gave it, I mean, everybody knows, if you give chocolate to dogs, it's toxic to them. And it's not just dogs, it's pretty much a lot of other mammals too.
Okay.
So a lot of times you literally just get lucky. So there is that. Other thing to notice is that I guess the biggest misconception is that if we don't test on animals, we are putting human life in danger. This cannot be farther from truth for the exact same reason I just mentioned. And you have to realize that even when you test on animals, the first people who are getting the drug, they're risking their lives. And that's why we have phase 1 clinical trials. That's why you try on very few people, 10, 20, etc. That's why they're already healthy volunteers. That's why you pay them. That's why you pay for clinical trials, because they're taking a risk. We established that even testing on animals doesn't remove the risk. It's still going to be risky. So as scientists, our job has to be to make sure before we go to these humans, we are as sure as we can possibly be that these drugs are safe. We can't be 100% sure, but we can be as sure as we can be. This means that we can use a lot of alternatives, not one by itself, but a combination of several types of alternatives to ensure the safety. Now, if you think that's wild, well, NIH is no longer supporting research on chimpanzees, and chimpanzees are our closest evolutionary ancestors, so or relatives. So if chimpanzees are not good, how come other primates and like mice and fish good, right? So NIH already stopped testing on chimpanzees. We know that a lot of countries in Europe, in the US, some states, they no longer test on animals for cosmetics. So I always ask people, like, everybody buys products that are not tested on animals, right? My toothpaste is not tested on animals. My, mouthwash isn't. When was the last time you used one of these products and your teeth fell off?
Yep.
So it doesn't mean when we don't test on animals, it doesn't mean that we are not testing for safety. We do, except we are using alternative methods that are better, faster, more accurate, and safer.
Yeah.
So there's that. Also, the EPA is going to stop testing on all mammals by 2035. So no longer testing on mice or any other mammal. So what does that tell you? How is EPA going to test toxicity from better, more novel methods? So what I'm trying to paint, the picture I'm trying to paint is that it's not me telling you about this, that our own government is taking steps. It's very slow, but you can see progression. So with this alternative, we can be as sure as possible. We can never be sure, but we can do our best. And the other thing is, so part of my job in pharmaceutical companies was like drug development. A lot of times you have to use various libraries of chemicals, trying to find the one that works, etc. Testing this using lab methods, using animals, is extremely time consuming, extremely expensive, and unreliable at the end. But computer models and other in vitro tests, they can test on thousands of chemicals in a short time. This is something we can never do if we actually test on animals. The other benefit is that when you use in vitro means in glass, in a lab. When you test in a lab, you can actually use human relevant material. Let's say you want to see if this drug interact with my like lung tissue, right? So all you have to do is to have some lung tissue from humans, add this drug and study it. Yes, it is not a complex organ. It's not in a human body. So that's a negative side. But the plus side is that it is human relevant. You are actually looking at human cells and how this drug binds to a human cell. In a mice, yes, it is a more complex system. It has different organs. You can see, there's heart, there is all the digestive system, all of that. But at the end of the day, it's binding to mice lung cells, which doesn't tell you much about like human cells. So to wrap this section up, I say that we have pretty good alternatives for many different fields. Are there fields where we don't have alternatives? Sure. But the approach should be, how can we spend more money developing this alternative instead of using something that is outdated? See, we did rely on animals in so many other ways. We use them in transportation. But can we all agree that horses are no longer the right solution for today's transportation's need in terms of scale and quality, right? We can't, if we insisted that let's just use horses, we wouldn't have planes today. Or another example is we use pigeons to send messages. Imagine if somebody just broke in and I had to write a letter to 911 with a pigeon and hope that they come here. It won't work, right? But imagine if we insist that no, pigeons work, we should just keep doing it. It's the best thing that we have. If we insist on an outdated technique, we are not gonna develop better alternatives. All I say is this: if 50 years ago we decided to allocate funding to alternatives to animal testing, today we would have all these alternatives exceeding animal testing already in all fields. We just didn't. But it's time to really switch that way of thinking.
Yeah. It seems to me that it's animal testing is still the status quo, and people have a really hard time moving away from the status quo. Well, it's always been done this way. And secondly, there's still so much money. The NIH and universities have so much money. I just saw a grant the other day that was for wounds for in combat soldiers to heal wounds. And it's like a wrap, right? It's doesn't even have any drugs in it. It's just a wrap to heal wounds. And I have had my fair share of wounds crashing on the bike and went through different wraps that they would come out with. But this was a grant in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for these scientists to test on animals. So they would literally shoot a pig in the shoulder and see if this wrap would heal well from it. Well, that to me is that kind of stuff is what I think the first that has to go by the wayside. I mean, there's going to be lots of humans that are willing to go, well, it's not going to blow your arm up. I mean, it's either going to heal well, really well, sort of well, or not so well. And then in 2 days, you take it off and get something better on, right? Like the risks are really, really, they're almost non-existent to the human who's going to have their arm wrapped. And they're doing this to animals. I think some of the, I'm going to call it low-hanging fruit, has got to shift first. And the scientist needs to stop taking this gigantic amount of money to do these horrifying things for animals that you can clearly test these on humans. And then maybe it'll go up the chain.
I was working on a drug for cancer and we had good results. We submitted it to FDA. FDA had required testing on mice at least 3. So we went with bare minimum, which was 3. I wasn't doing the animal testing, but I was involved in the project, which was annoying. But so we had to do, they did bare minimum 3 mice. It went to FDA with good results. Then they were like, actually, you should just do 10. And this is not 10 animals. It's 10 per group, per sex, per experiment. So that added up to thousands of mice, right? something people really should understand is the amount of suffering that is involved, and it's so unnecessary, and people don't really think about it. When they think about animal testing, they're like, oh, I take care of my animals. You always see the magazines for choosing your animal models. It's always a mice sitting on a test tube, a scientist cuddling, but it's not like that. It's living in isolation, taking away from your parents from birth, being stressed, in anxiety and all that, being stabbed every single day for like blood samples and everything. That's just the beginning. That's the experiment hasn't begun yet. When this experiments start, you have to give them infectious diseases. So consistently imagine having like infectious disease, living like that the entire time. They give them tumor cells. Imagine just living with big cancers from another speed, like a dinosaur cancer. Imagine if you had like just giant human tumors that the tiny mice had to develop. You have to burn their skin and then pour the stuff. Like burning wound healing is one of the most cruel like fields of animal testing.
Right.
So constantly burning them, giving them infections, cancer, all that, the amount of torture and suffering is just, for something that is not reliable at the end of the day in humans, it's heartbreaking. People who say that, they don't really understand the severity of this torturous process. It does not reflect on a moral society. It just doesn't.
No. It's hard to know what to buy. I feel like the cosmetic industry has done a fairly good job, thanks in part to the work that Pete has done, so that I know this mascara, this face cream hasn't been tested. But if you just walk down your general, aisle at a Rite Aid pharmacy, I mean, now I've learned I can't even really buy Band-Aids after what I saw a couple of weeks ago. That almost everything we have that's on the market that humans can buy at some point, they were tested on animals.
Yeah, so for things that have already been done,
Yeah.
What's done is done, especially like with that sort of thinking. Even soy or every food that we are eating had to be tested on animals at some point too. But I guess the real thing is like, how do we move forward from now? It's a broken cycle. There is a lot of money in it. Some scientists don't want to do animal testing, but they have to do because they have to show clinical relevance when they submit a grant.
Right.
So it's the thing that we have to attack it from multiple fronts. And scientists are also, they can be pretty, especially like when a person dedicates their entire life to animal testing, and now they're in their 60s running a old lab with a bunch of mice, they're not going to change their mind, right? So it's a difficult situation to tackle, but hopefully that's why with Allied Scholars, I'm also really just want to bring this education to the new generation, because hoping that if they know, they can do better.
Yeah, and they're going to make the right decisions. Yeah, that provides all of us with a lot of hope. Thank you for that, because I was just going down the negative Nelly rabbit hole there for a minute, which is easy to do, as you know, but thank you for that. I want to end on one of our favorite subjects here at Switch, dairy, non-dairy. You spent the recent holiday filming pretty expansive, large dairy farms. I won't say where, in the air and from the street. And you and I spoke just a moment about it before we came on air. I want to know so much, but maybe start with, what did you see that you would like to share about the industry, whether it's something that you feel like people maybe know some about or nothing at all about. You've been known to say the dairy industry is more cruel than the meat industry.
Me? Dairy is cruel? When did I say that?
We
Like
found it somewhere that it's more cruel than the meat industry,
like
the
every
dairy
single
industry.
tweet and every single post.
But you were also on a meat farm. I failed to mention it on this same trip. So you had the comparison right in front of your eyes.
I'm a food system scientist, so my job is to basically look at different food system, plant-based, animal-based, all that, the environmental problems, public health issues, all that. And I really want to make sure that I'm not one of those people who gets really disassociated from reality and just like working behind the computers and lose that sense of urgency of what it's like on the ground.
Yeah.
And these farms are not really super accessible. they're not like in the middle of a town. Some of them are, but like the big cow farms, dairy farms are not in the middle of a town. So
No.
I had to drive for hours to go to some of them. There were so many of them. You can just find them on Google Map. I wanted to go to a big beef farm, but I just decided to go to another dairy. How can you tell if it's a dairy? There is a giant section on the farm that you can see. It's white. And then when you zoom in, you see there are like tiny white dots. Each dot is a box. It's a crate where they use calves. They separate calves from their mothers. And of course, I had known this. I had seen the videos, but not with my own eyes. And I was like, I'm going there. So I had to drive in this all like remote roads between farms. I went around some of these facilities so I could like look at the baby calves. The cows were in really terrible situation. They could barely walk. These are mother cows, so they have to be forcibly impregnated multiple times, 5 or 6 times generally. And then every time they give birth, they have to separate those baby calves and they put them in these crates. Abusive cycle. But the scale of it is something that is really hard to imagine. As much as I have sympathy for animals, I've been wanting to make a video about this. I've been in Auschwitz, and I know that it's a sensitive topic, but I really want to share how I felt. When I visited Auschwitz, I wasn't sad, I wasn't emotional. And the only reason for that was the sheer load of emotions is so much that your brain just shuts down. Like you cannot understand the amount of suffering that happened here. You just tell yourself that I know that a lot of shitty things happen in front of my eyes. Like Auschwitz, you actually see that, that gate where the trains went in, you see all these actual gas chambers. And then you're like, and you look at it, it's green now. It's like a green light with lots of grass, and it rather looks pretty. You're like, I can't even imagine the amount of suffering, right?
So I know what you mean.
I had the same exact feeling. Like I couldn't connect with cows because there were so many of them. I was like, should I feel bad for you or for you or for you or for the rest of, or for those babies? Should I feel bad that you're walking on your feces? Should I look bad because I'm about to vomit from the smell? It's like overwhelming. So you're just like emotional. That's why you don't feel anything. It's just crazy. That was like, versus like when I go to a sanctuary, you can just connect with one cow. It's just so easy to connect with them, become eye to eye and see another person in there. But it's just like from out there when you're looking at like thousands of cows. So one of them was this concentration campus had 50,000 cows. 50,000. The city itself had 200,000. So this is like southeast of one city in Texas with lots of complaints for the smell and everything.
Sure.
So it has like 20% of city's population in cows. Then you see all these ponds. They are basically lakes full of waste. They're called lagoons. And I really wanted to drive around and, source of antibiotic resistant and a lot of other diseases. So I drove around, but I also wanted to fly because only when you fly, you can see the scale. Like you see, this is the city, this is the farm. Like the farm is a big fraction of the entire city. And then you see that there is a river right behind these lagoons, and you see a lake right there. Then you see people from actually it's like a lower socioeconomic class part of the city right around that farm. So it's like you get the scale only when you fly and look at this from the air. That's why I flew over them. That's why I went to this farm and just look at it. It's terrible. Sorry, that was long.
No, that's okay. It wasn't. And I wanted to hear your experience. And as you were speaking, I was wondering, you mentioned at the beginning of talking about this, that you wanted to do this because you wanted to create more of it. You don't want to lose that sense of urgency. And I know exactly what you mean, right? You spend too many days behind the computer working in this movement. And I can myself start with the language of, well, can only go as fast as we can go. We can only help so many. There's you can lose that sense of urgency. So when you were seeing the expanse of this, like you mentioned, it almost made you feel even more disconnected because you said, I can't, there's just so many, it's so much. It's not one that I'm looking at. Do I care for you or you or you or you or you? So leaving and reflecting back, how did it help with that? Encouraging and improving that sense of urgency that we need to have in this movement to do good work as fast as we can.
I think at the end of the day, I had seen all of this footage online, but never with my own eyes. So being there and knowing how easily it was accessible, how this wasn't an isolated case, how these are like your normal, friendly Texan farms, and that's the situation. Texas is a state where people are proud of dealing with animals, right? They don't
Right.
consider them animal abusers. I went to a ag university where ag was pretty big, and all the students all the time they said, we treat animals like our family. We have a ranch. I have a ranch.
Right.
And so going to these farms and just see how they're treated like a family of 50,000, it really helped. It really helps to bring that sense of urgency. Like I wasn't emotional there, but knowing why I wasn't that emotional, that's where the urge is the problem is so bad that I wasn't emotional. That's how bad it was. Like you are almost in a shock. But I also really wanted that, I talked to a lot of students, by extension that they trust me. So, every single time I give presentations in all these universities, Harvard, MIT, Brown, Columbia, I always show 3 minutes of Dominion.
Oh, right. I remember you saying that.
Yeah, and I just wanted people to know that, it's not just the documentary that I show. Here it is me. I went live on some of these farms because it was like, I'm here live. I'm going to show you this side of me are baby calves, and this side are just their mothers in like suffering. And that's the lagoon.
Right.
So really wanted to bring this to a lot of people.
Yeah. It's frustrating to me, and I'm sure it is to you sometimes, that we can show quite a lot and it still requires the human to connect the life of the cow with the life of a human. And the New York Times just did an article a couple days ago on what happened at that farm in Texas this summer that caught on fire. 18,000 cows' lives were lost. Smoke inhalation, just in the flames, burned to death. 18,000 of them. What was it? Because it took a while for them to assess the situation, as you can imagine, that expanse. And it turned out it was a manure vacuum that started it. And throughout the story, they're kind of weaving this one person that worked on the farm was missing, and they thought that she might have died. And it's like the thread of the story where, and she didn't. She was just missing for a while. 18,000 lives were lost. And we have this thread of this one life, which is just as important as any other life, as it is as important as these 18,000 other lives. And I just, after reading it, I thought that remains our main problem is just that connection, that life matters as much as this life, that the species that I am matters as much as the species that I'm not. Okay, well, how are you going to fix that? I'm leaving it on you. You're a scientist. You're going to come up with something. I don't know. It's like, do we implant chips? It's just, that's the toughie, I think.
Yeah, that's why we need alternative proteins. So plant-based, cultivated, other animal-free methods to produce food. So people can, at the end of the day, not everyone is going to make ethical choices, but if people have cheap food, which is nutritious, which is healthy, then they have no reason not to choose that, and tasty. So the goal is really to provide people with nutritious, healthful, cheap food. Then GFI's motto is basically how to make food or protein such that it tastes the same or better, but it costs the same or less. So I really like that. So when we have this, in that case, even the cruelest industry like McDonald's, they don't care about people. They don't care. All they want is money. Everybody literally just wants money. So they can make their money without killing the environment and animals and people, so that's a good strategy. So we need that. We need people who make people in influential positions, like Mayor Adams. You like the guy or not, he has done so much for New York City. It's the only city in the US that has plant-based programs in schools, in hospitals. So if you go to a hospital in New York City, if it's a public hospital, you're going to get plant-based food by default. Schools also serve plant-based food, the public schools. So that's the only city that has done that, just because the mayor just believed in plant-based food, not even a vegan, right? So he's not like an ethical vegan, that's what I'm trying to say. So still believing in plant-based food, that man was able to do so much. So my personal strategy is to make more people like him, more people in the position of power, as doctors, as scientists, as policymakers, as funders who fund the rest of us, as lawyers, and basically all these people a lot of times come from universities. So I'm just putting I see a lot of hope there. I just say that.
I like that solution.
Yeah.
I've learned so much from you today, from protein structure and function to what's a complete protein and the myths surrounding it, to cultivated meat, not lab meat, and what the future of that is, and onto the animal testing and why animal experimentation on every level is unnecessary and unneeded. And it was really hard but heartening to hear your desire to create more urgency just within yourself, and your bravery to go see what you'd seen on video so many times live from the plane and from your car in Texas. Thank you for doing that to help you not feel disconnected, because I think that's what we all need help with. I know I do every day to not feel so disconnected, because the expanse of the problem is so large. So thank you for being you and for spending time
thank
with
you for
me
having
again.
me. Just my duty. I always say before going vegan, I caused so much suffering and harm.
I did too.
I can't bring back those animals to life. All I can do is to spend the rest of my time saving their friends and their family. So, and right back at you, I have so much respect for the research you are doing, for your passion. You're a great example of being an athlete. I can talk about science of proteins. At the end of the day, people want to look at an Olympics medalist who is plant-based. That goes farther than me explaining science behind proteins, and just your dedication to the movement. It's really a pleasure to be in this with you. And like I always say, it's a shitty world. There's a lot of bad things happening to humans, to animals. Sometimes you feel not empowered to make the change as fast as we want. But really, the biggest honor of my life is to be in this movement with amazing, dedicated, compassionate people like yourself. It's a movement
proud to be
that,
your teammate.
It brings the best of humanity, because it's not a movement for us. It's for the world. It's for the environment. We are not into environmental protection because it saves our ass. We are in it because it saves other people. It saves animals. So my gratitude to you and to your work as well. And thanks for having me.
Back at you. All right. Until next time, because there'll probably be a next time.
Okay, cool. Can I say something real quick?
Oh, sure.
If you're vegan, thank you. Bad news, it's not enough.
Oh, no. Okay.
Please speak up. If you don't know how, reach out to me or anyone else. Look up AAM, Animal Activism Mentorship. Look at Veganuary Challenge 22. In order to speak up, it's not rocket science. Just share your vegan story. It's the lamest thing we can do, but it's very impactful. Just tell your friends and family why you decided to change. That's very impactful. Write reviews for places you go. Even the smallest steps, just whatever you do. In the face of injustice, silence is not an option. Just use your voice. please speak up. It's an urgent matter, and we need all the help we can get. So thank you for being here.
And it's not the lamest thing. It's started so many people on their activism journey, just sharing their own story and realizing, hey, that wasn't that hard. And so listened, and that felt good. And then we went out for, and then the snowball starts. So thanks for
Layman
those.
just meant it's the easiest thing.
There you go. There you go. It's not for everyone though. I mean, I have not there's people that just feel like I'm just doing it and I wish I was sharing more, but I don't want to get in people's face. I don't want to upset them. I don't, and on and on. So it is not easy for everyone. And just telling part of your story or a chapter of your story to one person this week is our challenge to you.
And
see how it feels.
Any step that you take. And at the end of the day, remember that a lot of fighting for injustice is not comfortable. It's not going to be comfortable.
No.
But we just have to, the gauge should be doing the right thing, not doing something that is comfortable. Always pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Yes, do whatever you can. But at the end of the day, do something that needs to be done, because there is a lot that needs to be done. I'm an introvert. I always say it just makes it uncomfortable to do public presentations, but I do it because I know that I have to do it. And then you learn, and then you get better, and you just go from there.
So
just
hard.
know that I like this, something that Paul Bashir said, I think, who said, be the activist that animals want you to be, not other vegans or not other people, right? So imagine being in that situation in a cage. What kind of a person do you want to advocate for you? Do you want them to be shy, to be worried about pissing people off, or do you want them to speak the truth and shine light on your suffering? So, and you can do that with kindness and compassion. It doesn't have to be harsh, but please speak up the truth. I stopped talking. Thank you so much.
No, it's okay. I feel like you just named the episode. Let's get uncomfortable with Dr. Faraz. Thank you. Because that's a lot of what this was about. And especially here at the end, as we went through the dairy footage that you saw. And Dr. Faraz has some extraordinary videos everywhere, YouTube, Instagram, on activism and how to be a powerful advocate for the voiceless. So go check those out, because, every little step matters. So get brave, right? Let's get uncomfortable. All right. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
My pleasure.